When you get caught, your brain has two choices: shut up or say something so spectacularly dumb it becomes a legend. These 49 Americans chose to become legends. From blaming a DUI on a fake Australian accent to claiming a stolen TV was just a lost pet they were helping. Here are the most insane things people have ever actually said to the police. 1. You have to appreciate the sheer theatricality of this next guy. Police responded to a disturbance at a Whole Foods, where a man was seen frantically shoving blocks of high-end, expensive cheese into the lining of his coat. When the officers cornered him near the organic produce, he didn't panic or beg for mercy. Instead, he straightened his back, looked them in the eye, and channeled his inner Che Guevara. He declared, "I'm not stealing. I'm performing a public service by liberating this oppressed, artisanal Gouda from its bourgeois prison." Apparently, in his mind, he wasn't a shoplifter. He was the freedom fighter for dairy products everywhere. The officers, sadly, were not sympathetic to the cause of cheese emancipation and promptly liberated him right into the back of a squad car. 2. A California highway patrolman clocked a Honda Civic screaming down the interstate at 90 miles per hour in a 55 zone. When the officer approached the window, expecting the usual sob story about a bathroom emergency or a pregnant wife, he got something completely new. The driver looked him dead in the eye, with zero trace of irony, and said, "My car has a medical condition, it just drives fast." He spoke with the concern of a parent talking about a sick child, implying the officer should be writing a prescription for the transmission rather than a speeding ticket. It's a bold move to claim your sedan suffers from hyperactive horsepower disorder. But, unsurprisingly, the cop decided the only cure for this particular medical mystery was a massive fine. 3. Florida is basically a content generator for police reports, and this incident is a prime example. An officer tapped on the window of a car that was parked directly in a marked fire lane, blocking a hydrant. The woman in the driver's seat rolled down the window and offered a defense that you won't find in any law book. She simply smirked and said, "It's okay, officer, I'm a Scorpio." She genuinely believed her zodiac sign gave her cosmic immunity to traffic laws, as if planetary alignment overrides public safety. The cop just stared at her, trying to process the sheer entitlement, before informing her that he didn't care if she was a Sagittarius or a ham sandwich. Fire lanes are for fire trucks, not for people who read their horoscope too much. 4. There is a special kind of confidence that only exists when you've had about 6 too many beers. During a DUI stop in Tennessee, an officer went through the standard field sobriety tests and asked the swaying driver if he knew the alphabet. The man puffed out his chest, shouted, "Yes," took a deep breath, and proceeded to remix the English language. He sang the alphabet song, but the letters were in a completely chaotic order, like he was playing Scrabble in a blender. He finished his performance with a triumphant, "Now you know my ZYXs." He looked so proud, like he just nailed a Broadway audition. The officer was trying so hard not to laugh that he almost forgot to read him his rights. Spoiler alert, jazz improvising the alphabet is a failing grade. 5. Video games are getting more realistic every year, but apparently some people are forgetting where the game ends and reality begins. A woman was pulled over for swerving across 3 lanes of traffic like she was dodging invisible bananas in Mario Kart. When asked for an explanation, she calmly stated, "I was just practicing for my video game." She seemingly operated under the delusion that if she crashed her sedan into a guardrail, she would simply respawn at the nearest checkpoint with full health. The officer had the distinct pleasure of informing her that out here in the real world, there are no reset buttons, no extra lives, and the game over screen looks a lot like a jail cell and a suspended license. 6. Down in the humid absurdity of Florida, a man was arrested for trying to execute a business transaction that belongs in the prehistoric era. He walked into a convenience store and attempted to trade a live 4-foot alligator for a 12-pack of beer. When the police arrived to break up this reptile-based commerce, the man was genuinely offended. His defense? "It's the currency of the swamp, man." He looked at the officers like they were the crazy ones for not understanding the exchange rate between lager and lizards. He genuinely thought he was just using local tender. Unfortunately, The convenience store didn't accept Visa, MasterCard, or Gator, and he was charged with possession of an exotic animal without a permit. 7. In a small town in Colorado, a man being arrested for public intoxication decided to play the "Do you know who I am" card, but with a bizarre twist. As they were cuffing him, he screamed, "You can't arrest me. My dog is the mayor of this town." The weirdest part is that he wasn't hallucinating. The town actually had a golden retriever with the ceremonial title of mayor. This guy truly believed that being the owner of the mayor granted him full diplomatic immunity like he was part of a royal family. The officers were unimpressed by his connection to the canine administration. It turns out, even if your dog holds public office, he can't issue a pardon for your disorderly conduct, mostly because he's a dog, and he just wants a treat. 8. A man in San Diego tried to pay for a $70 meal at a nice restaurant not with cash or credit, but with a crude drawing of a spider he had sketched on a napkin. When the police showed up to handle the theft of services, the man didn't apologize. Instead, he doubled down with artistic fury. He argued, "That drawing is worth way more than $70. I'm a famous artist." The level of delusion required to value a 5-minute doodle of an arachnid higher than a steak dinner is honestly impressive. He was not in fact a famous artist, and the restaurant owner was not looking to expand their portfolio. He learned the hard way that art is subjective, but the bill is objective, and you can't pay it with imagination. 9. Police in Nevada responded to a frantic burglary call in the middle of the night and arrived just in time to find a man halfway through a residential window. When the officers drew their weapons and shouted, "Freeze!" the man didn't panic or try to run. Instead, he turned his head, flashed a relieved smile, and said, "Thank God you're here. I'm a freelance security tester. You guys have a seriously slow response time. I'll be sending you my invoice." You have to admire the sheer audacity of treating a felony in progress like a corporate consultation. He essentially tried to give the police a negative Yelp review while actively breaking into a house. Unsurprisingly, the officers decided to pay his invoice with a pair of handcuffs and a free ride to the county jail. 10. A man in Oregon was caught red-handed trying to use a stolen credit card at a department store. When the officer cornered him, his explanation was almost spiritual in nature. He insisted, with a straight face, "The card isn't stolen. It just followed me home." He spoke about the Visa card with the same affection one might have for a stray puppy that shows up on your porch, as if the piece of plastic grew legs, developed a loyalty complex, and simply refused to leave his wallet. The officer, having heard every excuse in the book, didn't miss a beat and replied, "Well, isn't that sweet? Now it's going to follow you all the way to the station." 11. We have all blamed things on alcohol, but one man in a bar fight took it to a metaphysical level. As he was being cuffed, he told the officer, "I didn't do it. My evil twin brother who only appears when I'm drunk did it." The evil twin defense is a classic soap opera trope, but using it in a dive bar is a bold legal strategy. Apparently, this man believed he had a built-in, alcohol-activated scapegoat living inside him who was responsible for all his bad decisions. It's a convenient alibi, sure, but unfortunately for him, the law doesn't distinguish between you and your intoxicated alter ego, so both of them went to the drunk tank together. 12. An officer in rural Wisconsin pulled over a convertible and was baffled to see a full-size live goat sitting in the passenger seat, ears flapping in the wind. When asked to explain the farm animal riding shotgun, the woman replied with total sincerity, "He's my lawnmower. We're going to a very overgrown yard." While you have to respect the eco-friendly approach to landscaping, the Department of Transportation generally frowns upon livestock serving as co-pilots. The goat looked happy enough, probably enjoying the upgrade from the barn, but the officer was left with the headache of figuring out how to write a ticket for improper transport of biological gardening equipment. 13. A patrolman in Arizona pulled over a truck driver for not wearing a seatbelt. Instead of apologizing, the man patted his substantial round belly and said with a wide grin, "Officer, I don't need one. I've got my own airbag right here." He seemed to genuinely believe that his gut was safety rated by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. It was a joke he had probably been waiting years to use. The The cop, however, was not in the mood for amateur stand-up comedy and replied dryly, "That's great. Here's a $200 ticket for it." It turns out natural insulation doesn't exempt you from state safety laws, no matter how much you've invested in the buffet. 14. An elderly woman in a tiny smart car was pulled over by a state trooper for doing 90 on the interstate. The trooper, who was understandably furious about a vehicle the size of a toaster driving that fast, stormed up and yelled, "Ma'am, do you have any idea how fast you were going?" She didn't look scared. She leaned out the window, cupped her ear, and shouted back, "You'll have to speak up, Sonny. With the windows down, I can barely hear over the wind." She effectively turned the interrogation into a hearing test. She wasn't denying the speed. She was just complaining about the acoustics of the situation. It's hard to stay angry when grandma treats you like a mumbling grandchild at the dinner table. 15. Here's a question for you. What is the absolute worst thing to say when caught with a cart full of stolen goods? A woman in Oregon, apprehended with a mountain of unpaid groceries, looked the officer in the eye and defiantly stated, "The sign said 10 items or less. I have more than 10, so that rule doesn't apply to me." She attempted to use the store's express lane policy as a legal loophole for grand larceny. In her twisted logic, she had actually outsmarted the system by stealing too much stuff. The officer had to explain that while she was correct about the express lane rules, the laws against theft apply, regardless of whether you have 5 items or 500. 16. Sometimes the best defense is to make the situation so awkward that the police just want to leave. A deputy in Nevada pulled over a car that was moving at a snail's pace, causing a traffic jam. The driver, a charming elderly woman, rolled down her window and cheerfully asked, "Am I being arrested for driving too sexy?" It was the verbal equivalent of a stun grenade. The deputy was so thrown off by the question that his brain seemingly rebooted. He stammered, turned red, and eventually let her go with a warning to, drive less sexy. She knew exactly what she was doing, and frankly, she won that encounter. 17. During a booking procedure, officers asked a man covered head to toe in glitter for his occupation. He puffed out his chest and proudly declared, "I'm a dragon." The desk sergeant started typing, paused, and tried to bring some logic to the situation by asking, "Okay, but what do you do for money?" The man hissed and replied, "I hoard gold and protect my lair. Is that so hard to understand?" You have to feel for the officer trying to fit mythical beast into the employment field of the arrest report. And let's be honest, getting that much glitter off the precinct floor probably took a hazmat team and 3 weeks of scrubbing. 18. A young driver in California was pulled over for doing over 100 miles per hour on the freeway. When the officer asked for an explanation, the kid smirked and quoted Buzz Lightyear from Toy Story, saying, "I wasn't speeding, I was just falling with style." He seemingly expected the officer to high-five him for the pop culture reference. However, the officer, a man in his 50s who likely preferred Dirty Harry to Pixar movies, was not a fan. He promptly wrote him a ticket for flying too close to the sun. It turns out, quotes from animated children's movies are not admissible as a legal defense in traffic court. 19. Pulled over for a severe DUI, a man in Arizona knew he was in trouble and decided to try a desperate romantic hail, "Mary." He looked at the female officer with blurry eyes and said, with what he thought was immense charm, "If you let me go, I'll name my firstborn child after you." The officer stared at him, stone-faced, and replied, "Sir, my name is Kevin." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a soda can. It was a swing and a miss of epic proportions. Not only did the bribery fail, but he also managed to insult the officer's parents' naming choices in the process. 20. We've all seen bad acting, but this performance deserves a Razzie. During a traffic stop in California, a man was clearly intoxicated but decided his best defense was cultural appropriation. He slurred to the officer, "I'm not drunk, I'm just from Australia." He attempted a terrible accent that sounded like a mix of Cockney British and a pirate having a stroke. He seemed to genuinely believe that faking a nationality would somehow invalidate the breathalyzer results, or that Australians are legally allowed to drive with a blood alcohol level of 0.20. Spoiler alert. The The machine doesn't care about your geography, and neither did the cop. 21. A state trooper came across a car neatly parked in a ditch, completely undamaged. The driver was standing next to it, unharmed, but looking a little rattled. When asked what happened, he explained with wide-eyed sincerity, "A ghost deer ran out in front of me. It was transparent, but so majestic." He described the phantom animal with such poetic detail, you almost wanted to believe him. The trooper, however, had to fill out a report. He couldn't exactly write spectral wildlife interference, so he simply noted the cause as driver was spooked. Honestly, a ghost deer is a better story than texting while driving. 22. In rural Montana, a police officer pulled over an ancient, rusted-out truck that was hurtling down a dirt road way too fast. When he asked the elderly driver for his license, the old man squinted and said, "Son, I don't have a license. I lost it 30 years ago for a DUI." The cop was exasperated. He leaned in and asked, "So you're telling me you've been driving without a license for 30 years? The old man looked offended and replied, "Oh heavens no, I only drive when I'm drunk." You have to admire the honesty even if it immediately fast-tracked him to a jail cell. 23. An officer in Arizona pulled over a driver who was weaving all over the road. Suspecting intoxication, he asked the man to perform a field sobriety test and walk a straight line. The man stumbled, swayed, and nearly fell over before looking up at the cop with genuine frustration. He complained, "This line is defective. You guys need to get this road fixed." He wasn't drunk, the infrastructure was just wobbly. The officer, deadpan, keyed his radio and said, "Dispatch, be advised, the white line on Main Street appears to be compromised. Use caution." It's hard to argue with a man who blames the asphalt for his own lack of balance. 24. Sometimes, a crime is just a cry for help. A woman in a minivan was pulled over for erratic driving, swerving between lanes. When the officer approached, she didn't look drunk. She looked defeated. She explained, "Officer, my kids were singing Baby Shark for the 30th time in a row. I wasn't swerving. I was losing my will to live." The officer paused. He looked into the back seat at the toddlers. He looked back at the mother. If this went to a jury of parents, she would probably be acquitted by reason of justifiable insanity. 25. A man in Arizona was pulled over, and officers found a small bag of a white powdery substance in his car. When confronted, he didn't claim it wasn't his. He looked the officer in the eye and said, "These aren't drugs. They're my emotional support sprinkles." He claimed he just needed a little sprinkle of joy, now and then, to get through the day. It's a creative rebranding of a felony, I'll give him that. The officer's report allegedly noted the suspect's need for unconventional emotional support, right before booking him for possession of a controlled substance. 26. College students will try to intellectualize anything. Police in Ohio responded to a noise complaint at a student apartment and found a stolen municipal traffic cone sitting proudly in the living room. When asked to explain the theft of city property, the student adjusted his glasses and claimed it was an ironic art installation, commenting on the arbitrary nature of public authority. He spoke as if the officer just didn't get the deep symbolism of orange rubber. The officers were not impressed by his postmodern critique and made him return the art to the street corner where it belonged. 27. An officer in rural Tennessee encountered a man walking down the side of the road covered head to toe in chicken feathers. It looked like a pillow fight gone wrong in a barn. When the officer stopped to ask if he was okay, the man sighed heavily and admitted, "I lost a bet to a chicken." He refused to elaborate further. He just stood there, feathery and defeated, leaving the cop to wonder forever what kind of high-stakes gambling ring was operating in the local coop. Did the chicken have a royal flush? We will never know. 28. In Las Vegas, where reality is already a bit flexible, a man was caught pickpocketing tourists. When the police apprehended him, he offered a defense that belongs in an acting class. He said, "I didn't steal his wallet. I was just borrowing his identity for a few hours." He framed it not as a crime, but as an immersive, temporary method acting experience. He was just trying to walk a mile in another man's credit score. The victim, however, was not a fan of this unsolicited performance art and pressed charges immediately. 29. A patrolman in Texas was questioning a suspect about a recent assault in a bar parking lot. He finally got a confession, but the logic was absolutely baffling. The suspect leaned in conspiratorially and whispered, "Okay, I did it." But in my defense, he looked at me in a tone of voice that I didn't appreciate. The officer just blinked slowly. He had to process the idea of looking in a tone of voice. It's synesthesia mixed with aggression. The cop probably wondered how you even begin to write that down in an official police report without sounding crazy yourself. 30. "He started it," a grown man yelled, pointing an accusatory finger at a squirrel. He had just been arrested for throwing rocks in a public park in Colorado. He insisted to the officers that the squirrel had looked at him disrespectfully and that he was merely standing his ground against woodland aggression. Think about that for a second. A fully grown human felt so threatened by the vibe of a rodent that he engaged in physical combat. The squirrel, for the record, refused to comment and fled the scene, remaining at large. 31. "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned on social media." A woman in Chicago was arrested for keying her ex-boyfriend's car from bumper to bumper. Her justification was simple and chilling. She told the police, "He changed his relationship status on Facebook to single before telling me." It was an appropriate, pre-approved response. She seemed to believe that Mark Zuckerberg had written a clause into the terms of service that made vandalism legal in cases of digital heartbreak. The police informed her that, unfortunately, Facebook etiquette is not actually legally binding in a court of law. 32. An officer in Georgia found a man sitting by a private pond with a fishing rod, but no fish in his bucket. Suspicious of trespassing, the officer asked what he was doing. The man looked up with zen-like calm and replied, "I'm not fishing, officer. I'm teaching these worms how to swim." He then solemnly lowered a worm into the water, watched it wiggle, and pulled it back up. It's the kind of excuse that is so bizarre it almost works. Is he a poacher? Or is he a humanitarian educator for invertebrates? The officer probably just told him to leave before the worms drowned. 33. These aren't my drugs. They belong to the pants. This wasn't a joke. A man in Tennessee told police with a straight face that the jeans he was wearing, which he had admittedly stolen earlier that day, came preloaded with illegal substances. He was painting himself as the unfortunate victim of criminally inclined trousers. It's a bold defense strategy. Admit to theft to avoid drug charges, while blaming the apparel. "Officer, I'm innocent. It's these Levi's that are the bad influence." Surprisingly, the judge didn't buy the possessed pants theory. 34. Let's go to Florida, the world capital of weird crimes. A man was caught red-handed throwing a live alligator through a Wendy's drive-thru window. This isn't the setup to a joke. This actually happened. When the cops finally cornered him, his explanation for this act of reptilian chaos was simple and profound. "I was just teaching him a lesson." He didn't clarify who he was, the alligator or the Wendy's employee. Was the gator being punished with fast food? Or was the employee being punished with a gator? The ambiguity is what makes it art. 35. In the sweltering heat of Miami, an officer pulled over a driver for a routine violation. When asked for his license and registration, the man didn't reach for his wallet. Instead, he calmly reached into his glove box and handed the officer a crumpled coupon for a free car wash. He then looked up with a completely straight face and asked, "Is this what you're looking for?" He seemed to genuinely hope that a complimentary wax and shine would serve as valid identification. The cop, tired, sweaty, and defeated by the Florida humidity, just sighed deeply and said, "Just get out of the car, sir." It was a bold attempt at bribery using the lowest possible currency. 36. A young woman in California was pulled over for reckless driving after swerving dangerously across the highway. When the officer approached, expecting a medical emergency or intoxication, He got a thoroughly modern excuse. "Officer, I'm sorry," she said, holding up her smartphone. "I was trying to take a selfie with that cute cow back there." She spoke as if this was a perfectly reasonable explanation for endangering lives. The cop's response was a mix of fury and disbelief. "A selfie? You almost caused a 10-car pileup for a cow." Apparently, getting the perfect angle with livestock is now worth risking a multi-vehicle collision. 37. A woman in Arizona was caught doing 20 over the limit and decided to appeal to the officer's spiritual side. "My astrological chart said it was a favorable day for travel," she explained with conviction. "That implies speed, doesn't it?" She was using the stars as her legal defense team, arguing that Jupiter's alignment practically mandated a lead foot. The officer, a stoic man who clearly had zero time for cosmic excuses, simply replied, "Ma'am, the only sign that matters today is the speed limit sign." It turns out the highway patrol doesn't operate on zodiac time. 38. A cop in rural Kentucky pulled over a speeding pickup truck that was tearing down a back road. He walked up to the window, and before he could even say a word, the young driver blurted out, "My girlfriend told me she was pregnant, and I'm trying to get to the state line before it becomes my problem." The honesty was breathtaking. The officer, a father of 4, who knew exactly how life works, just laughed a deep, weary laugh. He shook his head and said, "Son, that problem follows you." He wrote the ticket, but you could tell he almost felt pity for the kid's naivety. 39. An officer on night patrol stumbled upon a scene that looked like a movie cliché. He found a man sweating and grunting, trying to pry open an ATM with a crowbar. When the officer shined his flashlight and confronted him, the man didn't run. He dropped the tool, threw his hands up, and exclaimed, "Thank God you're here, officer. This machine just ate my card." You have to admire the pivot. In under 3 seconds, he transformed himself from a felon breaking into a bank machine to a frustrated customer just trying to get his debit card back. That is improvisation talent worthy of an Oscar. 40. Picture this. A traffic stop on a deserted country road at 2 in the morning. The officer suspects a DUI and asks the driver if he's been drinking. The man behind the wheel, a grizzled farmer in his 60s with zero filter left, leans out the window, looks the officer dead in the eye and says, "Son, I'm so drunk I can't even see the problem." It wasn't a confession. It was a statement of fact, delivered with brutal honesty. The patrolman reportedly just shook his head, realized there was no point in a field sobriety test, and radioed for a tow truck. At least he didn't lie. 41. Police in Ohio were arresting a man for trying to start a fight with a fire hydrant when he suddenly became indignant. He stopped resisting and shouted, "Hey, you can't arrest me, it's my birthday." He seemed to genuinely believe in the existence of a birthday law, a magical 24-hour period where all minor crimes are forgiven as a celebratory treat. He argued that it was his one day of the year to be a public nuisance without consequence. The arresting officer didn't even crack a smile. He simply finished cuffing the man and said, "Happy birthday. You can blow out the candles on your mugshot." 42. All right, put yourself in the officer's shoes. You pull over a car for illegally using the carpool lane, which requires 2 or more passengers. You look inside and see a guy driving with a full-size, fully dressed mannequin buckled up in the passenger seat. When you ask what's going on, he doesn't miss a beat. He replies, "She's my emotional support person." He claimed the plastic woman provided him with necessary psychological stability. What do you even say to that? Does she have ID? Is she registered? It's the kind of absurdity that makes you want to retire early. 43. A man arrested for public intoxication was being booked at the police station. When the sergeant asked for his name to enter into the system, the man puffed out his chest and declared, "My name is not guilty." He thought he had found the ultimate legal loophole. If his name is not guilty, how can the judge convict him? The booking sergeant, who had seen it all and was impressed by nothing, didn't even look up from his paperwork. He simply replied, "All right, Mr. Not Guilty, you have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you start now." 44. An officer in Ohio stopped a man for walking down the street wearing a live large snake draped around his neck like a scarf. When questioned about the reptile, the man indignantly replied, "He's a service animal. He helps with my anxiety." The officer, trying to keep a straight face while eyeing the constrictor, asked, "And what service does he provide?" The man answered with total sincerity, "He gives really good hugs." I mean, technically, he's not wrong. Constriction is a form of hugging, just with a much higher fatality rate. 45. Imagine being the officer who has to write this report without laughing. A man arrested for starting a brawl in a bar in Wisconsin explained his motivation like this. He said, "My aura was beige, officer. Beige. You understand? I had no choice." He treated the comment about his spiritual color like a slur against his mother. The level of spiritual indignation was so intense that for a second, the cop almost sympathized. Being called beige is pretty insulting in the aura community. It implies you're spiritually boring. Still, punch a guy for it and you go to jail. 46. Caught red-handed running down the street with a stolen 50-inch TV under his arm, a man in Philadelphia had an instant alibi ready. "I'm not stealing it. I'm just helping this TV get home. It looked lost." He portrayed himself not as a looter, but as a good Samaritan for lost electronics. He was just guiding the wayward appliance back to its natural habitat. It's a noble calling, really. Unfortunately, the police tend to view escorting televisions without a receipt as grand larceny, regardless of how altruistic your intentions might sound. 47. A state trooper pulled over a car that looked like it had been through a demolition derby and was currently held together primarily by duct tape and prayers. He asked the driver if the vehicle was actually safe to be on the road. The driver patted the dashboard affectionately and said, "She's fine. The duct tape is just holding all her horsepower in." You have to admire the optimism. He viewed the tape not as a structural necessity, but as a containment field for raw power. The trooper, however, was less impressed by the engineering and more concerned about the bumper falling off. 48. An officer stopped a man for walking a toaster on a leash down the sidewalk. The man was treating the appliance like a beloved pet, even stopping when it sniffed a lamppost. His explanation was simple and heartfelt. "He thinks he's a dog. I don't have the heart to tell him." The officer, realizing this was a situation that required a delicate touch, knelt down, solemnly inspected the toaster, and then stood up. "Sir, I appreciate that, but local leash laws are very strict. I'm going to need you to keep your appliance under control. Sometimes you just have to roll with the crazy." 49. Finally, a woman caught with a bag full of stolen cosmetics tearfully explained her actions to the police. "I wasn't stealing. The universe told me they were a gift from my spirit." She believed she was on a cosmic shopping spree where everything was 100% off. The arresting officer listened patiently to her metaphysical defense before delivering the reality check. He said, "Well, the universe is about to tell your spirit it has a court date for shoplifting. It turns out, manifesting abundance is still a crime if you don't pay for it at the register." And that's 49 masterclasses in what not to say to a police officer. But now it's your turn. Forget these amateurs. What is the single best, most outrageous excuse you've ever used that actually worked? We know you have one. Your secret is safe with the entire internet in the comments below. If you want more proof that common sense isn't so common, give this video a like and smash that subscribe button. It's the only smart decision you have to make today.